Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the City Council regular meeting for Tuesday, May 1st to order. Madam City Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Christy Malchow.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Karen Moran.
Present.
Tom Hornish.
Present.
Councilmember Jason Ritchie.
Present.
Councilmember Chris Ross.
Present.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Present.
Councilmember Ramiro Valderrama.
I think that might be him.
Right on cue.
All right.
Oh, there you go. Stay present.
Yeah, present.
All right. Great. Councilmember Hornish, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I would be proud to. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded.
I would like to make one suggestion for a change and an addition. Under unfinished business, I'd like to add a continued discussion of what we did last night on the LOS and the comp plan amendments. Unfinished business, if council so chooses.
Okay. So we've had an amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, which is to add a discussion on the level of service and comp plan under unfinished business, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay. By a vote of 6-1, the amendment passes. Now, all those in favor of the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 6-1, the amended agenda passes. We have executive session if necessary here, Lyman. Is there something that we need to?
I do not believe it is necessary at this point.
Okay, great. So we will now move to public comment. Wait for our esteemed city clerk to bring this up. We'll read very quickly. This is an opportunity for the public to address the council. 3 minutes limit per person or 5 minutes if representing the official position of a recognized community organization. If you would like to show a video or PowerPoint, it must be submitted or emailed by 5 p.m. the end of business day to the city clerk, Melanie Anderson, at manderson@sammamish.us. Please be aware council meetings are videotaped and are available to the public. First, I have James Eastman. Name and address, please.
James Eastman, on vacant property along 196th Avenue Northeast, to have a presentation. Tonight's presentation is on what money can buy. A Century League field. The stadium alone cost $360 million. Next slide. Do I have the clicker? Someone stole it. Uh-oh.
We'll give you a few extra seconds here, Mr. Eastman.
It's all right. I'm not going to go long today. I promise. $520 million for Safeco Field. Mayor, this next one's for you. I think you were the last one to comment on being able to build a bridge across the lake. Well, we actually did it across the Tacoma Narrows, which actually I pulled a ruler on it. It's actually slightly longer, just slightly, than Lake Sammamish. So that could be had. That cost $720 million for a brand new bridge. So last year I gave a presentation on light rail, and Councilmember Valderrama, the number that you threw out there for all the money that we're contributing to light rail approaches $1 billion. Actually, that's Sound Transit bus, ST1, 2, and 3. Sammamish residents are paying $1 billion. Is there a way to go to the next slide, Melanie? Actually, go 2 slides if you can. So we're paying $1 billion of our money, which actually would pay for that bridge if we could use it, which obviously we're not going to go build a bridge. But that's money that has been approved. And as I read through the red line edition of yesterday's agenda/minutes packet, and I did a Control F, and I looked for the word light rail. I couldn't find it anywhere in our plan. I thought, well, ST3 was approved in 2016. They've talked about it. I know that's money that the city doesn't want to spend. They're not for spending it. Then again, it's $1 billion that we're going to go spend, which is at least 4 times as much as we have in our transportation plan, much of which is not funded. One more slide. So, and then I looked at this slide and I thought, well, light rail is up there, going to be there in Marymore Park, and all these intersections that we're looking at, none of them are on the way to light rail. So I want to encourage the council and the city staff as we get to redo this transportation master plan that we prioritize a route to light rail, prioritize getting Sammamish residents to light rail. 405 is going to be widened from Renton to Bellevue. Tons of people moving out into Black Diamond, Maple Valley. They're all going to be coming up through Issaquah along the lake. We want to protect that route for our residents to get to light rail. And I would just like to see that we identify it and address it in our upcoming master plan redo. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Deb Sogi.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Deb Sogi, and I'm the director of the Sammamish Chamber, and I'm here to update you on some things. So around town in Saffron, things are buzzing. We've got new businesses there. We've got Orange Theory signing people up for fitness. We've got people all excited about the Vietnamese restaurant coming, and Pagliacci Pizza dine-in restaurant with serving beer and wine too, plus takeout. We've got the Sammamish Cafe Spirits is just now opening every single night during the week. So Monday through Friday, they'll be open till 9. And then they'll be open till 10 on the weekends. What else is buzzing over there? We've got BECU coming to the corner where Verizon store was, and we've got a yoga studio coming to where Columbia Fitness was back in the corner of Saffron. So it's been empty for a long time. People have been wondering what's going on, and finally we have a whole mass of business coming in there. We did unfortunately lose one of our 28-year business that people loved in Sammamish, Carousel. Excuse me, they left and went to Snoqualmie, and not by their choice. They didn't want to leave, but unfortunately some of the property owners said they had to leave. So it's sad when we lose a family-owned business, so we're all kind of sad to lose that gift store. So we'll see what happens next. And otherwise, people are still they feel they're suffering because of the moratorium, because they think building isn't going to continue very fast up forth. So I'm still getting complaints from the businesses that are there now, like, how long is this going to take before we get more people driving by? The Sky Apartments are due to open in the fall. And there are spaces below them that are for lease right now, and they have people looking at those. So the other thing that's happening around town is the farmers market is opening on May 9th, and I want to thank you on behalf of the chamber that you let us run the Sammamish Farmers Market. It's a privilege for us to do that. And this year, we have, on the first day, we're going to have an enter to win, and someone will win a bag of groceries plus a $100 gift card to Met Market. And Metropolitan Market is our sponsor, our big sponsor of the farmers market, very community-oriented. So please support Met Market. The other thing that's happening is we're getting some new vendors. And I have tried to get new farmers, and we have some that are just on the border of coming, but haven't gotten them yet. But we have all the same farmers we had last year, all the same food people. We do have a new one, Urban Sprouts. We have a garden person that's coming with starter plants for the spring, so you can make your plantings for flowers and vegetables. We have Mama D's, which is going to bring artesian bread, French breads, jams, jellies, pickled items. We haven't had that in a while. We have an Indian food truck coming, and that's the new food person. Plus, Buns on Wheels, which is very popular, will be there every Wednesday this year, not like last year where he's in and out. And all the same beloved vendors for dinner out. So come out, enjoy dinner at the farmer's market on Wednesday, 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And we have the grand opening on the 9th, next Wednesday at 3:50. And all of you council received an invitation, and city manager as well. Please come out and enjoy, and staff too. Please come out and enjoy the farmer's market. It's going to be a fun day, and it's not going to rain. I won't let it. So if it rains, I guess you can call me a liar. So thank you for all you do to help us run the farmer's market. We're looking forward to it. That's all. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Next, I have Thomas Stagg.
Good evening. I'm here about agenda item number 4, the proclamation of Affordable Housing Week. We want to thank you for proclaiming May 14th through 18th. Oh, sorry, I didn't introduce myself or tell you where I live. It's only my second time here. I'm a little nervous. I'm Thomas Stagg. I live in the Uplands neighborhood of Sammamish. I work for an accounting firm that specializes in affordable housing.
We do need your address too. Sorry.
23226 Southeast 47th Way.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll start from the top then. Thank you for proclaiming May 14th and 18th as Affordable Housing Week, and for your recognition of the urgent need for affordable housing in our community. Last time I attended your meeting, a citizen raised the question when Sammamish was going to get a Dairy Queen. While I echo and support her question, I think the city of Sammamish's continued commitment to affordable housing is almost as important to our commitment to get a Dairy Queen here. I also want to take this chance to thank you for your generous donation to the Arch Fund to support affordable housing on the east side. As your proclamation states, too many students in our classrooms do not have a stable place to call home, and too many families in our cities are struggling to just stay in a house. Our goal for Affordable Housing Week is not only to call attention to the level of need, but also to highlight policy solutions and the important work that's currently being done to make a difference. If you visit the Housing Development Consortium, there's a website of events that are happening during this week. However, when we talk about affordable housing, I think many people are confused as to what affordable housing looks like in Sammamish and the greater King County area. So what does it look like here? Affordable housing looks like a single mother and her 2 kids who now have a safe, affordable place to live. It looks like a school teacher being able to afford to live in our school district. It looks like a senior citizen being able to age with dignity in a home of their own. It looks like supporting our vets with service-rich housing that addresses not just where they live, but their mental health issues as well. It looks like a child being able to do homework around the kitchen table as opposed to under the dome light of a car. On a cold February morning this year, I was driving down the hill to I-90, and I passed a car that appeared to have an inch of ice on the inside of its window. When I passed, I looked in and saw there was 2 school-aged children that looked like they had slept in the car overnight, and that's what created the ice on the window. And I started to think of my 3rd grade daughter at Sunny Hills and the struggles that students have in school as it is, and that her and her friends go through. And I thought how much harder it must be for these kids that don't have a home. And that's why I'm committed to affordable housing, and that's why I thank you for your commitment for that as well. Because most importantly, affordable housing is education. Affordable housing is healthcare. Affordable housing is showing our commitment to our future generation, to our vets, and to our children. We hope that you'll join us for the events that we have planned this week. If I could recommend one event, it's the difference that home makes, housing and homelessness on the east side, on Thursday, the 17th from 6 to 8 at Bellevue First Congregational Church. And I thank you for your time and your continued commitment. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. And just as a side note, Thomas, is our proclamation for Affordable Housing Week is on our consent calendar, so we won't single that one item out, but I do have a very nice proclamation here.
Thank you.
Okay, next I have Mary Wichter.
Hello, my name's Mary Wichter, and I live at 408 208th Avenue Northeast in Sammamish. And I'm speaking tonight, and it may affect your consent agenda item 5, or particularly number 10, on the bridge and the changes for it. Can our bridge aid wildlife too? Transportation, like the Washington Department of Transportation, the I-90 Wildlife Bridges Coalition, the Washington Department of Natural Resources, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and others came together for this exciting project. There's a short video I sent you the link for, and it talks about how changing a bridge design has helped the environment, the community, the wildlife, and safety of people traveling. What they did is the wildlife underpass was about 150 feet long. They changed it a little bit, and now they have deer and other things using it. Here shown is deer, but they have spotted owl, grizzly bear, gray wolf, bull trout, elk, cougar, wolverines, and river otters, who are just a few of the mammals that inhabit the lands and use these type of bridges. This is a Memorial Day traffic from 2015, and you can see the deer there and very safely crossing while all the drivers safely cross. And on your consent calendar, you're looking at doing an amendment for the bridge foundation, changing the number of piles from 4 to 3, and are using driven piles or drilled shafts. And I wonder, during that $409,000 adjustment for the consultant, if they could look to see if there's any small modifications or tweaks that might be able to be done so that wildlife can pass through better during the construction period, which I think will take more than a year, and also in the future. So this is a Sammamish maps for it. You can see, so this is the city's map for 7 and 8, and phase 1 is 7. This is the same area. You can see there's Yellow Lake that comes down there from Klahani down to the green. And if I were an animal, I'd want to walk where the green is to the green. And if there's a bridge there, that'd be cool to transfer through. This is a topographical map. You can see the seep stuff is more to the lower right corner there. This is, it's called a hillshade, but it's a LiDAR. You can see Yellow Lake there. You can see where the ravine would run, where the bridge must be crossing. I talked with Andrew Zaggers at a recent meeting, and he said the bridge should be about 35 feet high at its highest place, so there should be ample room for animals to go through, not just fish and water. And I just did this a King County map. You have to look there for noxious weeds. There's actually 3 points for noxious weeds, and it shows some of the landslide hazard areas outside of the city. But I think we need to look at these things, because I think you can have your project and you can help wildlife, just like we've shown for the I-90 project. Maybe even a remote camera would be fun to install. I know that Mary Piggott did that when you guys were doing Big Rock Park, and she was laughing about the people and the animals and everything that she saw going under that. I think that would allow people to see what's happening when you're doing the construction of it, and it would also involve and inform citizens more. And I think if people relate to things more, then they're likely to have a tad bit more patience. So I'm asking that the city council members please review the links that I emailed today and sent, to see if there is anything we can do to maybe have it work as well for wildlife. And on this prior map, do you see the yellow that runs mostly east-west, but there's one north-south? Those are actual mapped wildlife corridors that King County did a long time ago, so I don't know if they're still current. But you can see there isn't a join between where Klahani is and then to the far one, and I think when you put the bridge in, you will see doing that. And on the I-90 project, they had a guy that they saw a bear going, so they put a strip of barbed wire, so when the bears would duck under it, it would pull some of their hairs. They took the DNA and they did testing, and they found out by the bears crossing under the bridge, they were getting more genetics and crossbreeding and biodiversity. So I think that's a good thing, and I just think we should consider that it's kind of an easy plus, I think, for your bridge project. I'm glad that you went with it that way, and I'd like to consider it as part of, I believe, consent agenda 10. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, do you know, I know we don't, it's on consent, so we probably don't have Lochner here, but I would assume with a 35-foot height on the bridge that there's the ability for wildlife to pass. I mean, obviously there's the creek
Yes,
there, but.
That is our thought as well.
Okay. Very
So we will discuss that a little bit further the next time we do a presentation on the design. We'd be happy to bring that up.
Very good. Next, I have Sharon Steinbus.
Hello, my name is Sharon Steinbus, 24933 Southeast 14th Street, Sammamish. Okay. Stormwater ponds, attractive green stormwater infrastructure complementing a neighborhood, or ugly stormwater prisons. Most stormwater ponds are simply mowed to the water's edge. Mowing stormwater ponds is expensive for the city, almost $200,000 annually. Stormwater ponds could be planted with native plants to help purify water, provide a carbon sink, and benefit the climate, and create wildlife habitat. City staff is working on a pond retrofit strategy that may reduce the $200,000 amount in the future, creating a no-mow zone for native plants to thrive and taking a pond off the city's expensive to-do list. The city's strategy would include pond restoration and incorporating more native plants. To test this idea, the city allowed a pilot project at the Lancaster Ridge Stormwater Pond near Big Rock Park. The Sammamish stormwater stewards, with the help of volunteers, worked to restore and reinvigorate the Lancaster Ridge Stormwater Pond. Many plants came from plant salvage activities in Sammamish, and many hours of community service work were provided by volunteers. Okay, this doesn't show up. Volunteers are the backbone of a project, including volunteers from Young Scouts and YMCA. In Sammamish, we are lucky to have our volunteer coordinator, Elby Jones. At the Lancaster Ridge site, city staff installed a pathway for easier access and large landscaping rocks as seating areas. Native plants create both habitat and food for wildlife. The stormwater pond is now a neighborhood asset with a path for viewing and enjoying the native plants and the wildlife. Where do we get all the native plants? From plant rescues and salvages in Sammamish. Notice some of the numbers on this slide. Over 700 native plants have been rescued, with many hours of volunteer time invested to plant in restoration sites, including Sammamish parks. This is a subdivision soon to go in near Inglewood Junior High. Quadrant Homes has already agreed to let us come in and to dig and rescue plants at the 9.6-acre Trillium subdivision, but we need a place to store, grow, and propagate the native plants. So I would like to put in a pitch for a Sammamish native plant nursery. We just need a flat bit of land with access to water. Future dreams would include raised beds and a greenhouse for propagation. Let's save a piece of Sammamish by planting Sammamish with rescued native plants. Thank you.
Thank you.
And have you received this Adopt a Stormwater Pond brochure? Has everybody received it?
You can pass it to Chris, and he can pass it down the dais. Thank you for all of your work and all of the stormwater stewards. I think what you guys are doing is great, so thank you.
Thanks.
Next, I have Eric Jarvis.
Good evening. I have no slides. My name is Eric Jarvis, and I live at 4100 232nd Avenue here in Sammamish. I'm here representing the 25-plus Jarvises who have had, and many will continue to have, a presence here in what is now Sammamish for over 45 years. I'm very pleased to address the City Council this evening as you consider the final plat consent of the first phase of the Meadow Leaf community, in which my family is a partner along with Connor Homes. We have waited a long time for this day and would like to describe some of the benefits the citizens of Sammamish will enjoy as a result of the investment made by this project. Issaquah Pine Lake Road Southeast has not been deemed safe for pedestrians since we moved here 45 years ago. As a result of the construction activities related to the Meadow Leaf community you are considering tonight, there is now a sidewalk, curb, planter strip, and a bike lane from 32nd to 42nd Avenues on Issaquah Pine Lake Road, providing safe pedestrian access to the Sunny Hills Elementary and Pine Lake Middle School, both of which I attended, by the way. In addition, turn lanes have been installed to allow traffic to move smoothly by, while turning vehicles wait for a break in traffic. In addition, an ADA-approved crosswalk has been installed at 42nd, allowing the existing communities to the east to safely access the new sidewalk. At the intersection with 42nd Avenue, a traffic light has been installed, removing a soon-to-be failing intersection from the list of concurrency items to be dealt with by the city. On 42nd, there is now a sidewalk and curb along the entire 1,500-foot straightaway, connecting it to the existing sidewalk at 232nd Avenue. Lighting has been installed along this stretch, and already I have seen many of our neighbors enjoying the curbed walking area in the evening, safe from traffic on that stretch. I understand this section of Issaquah Pine Lake Road has been on the traffic improvement plan list since 2005. The proposed completion date has been moved out several times due to other traffic priorities within the city. We appreciate the patience of those using this road during the past few months as PSE moved utility poles and the construction of these improvements temporarily disrupted traffic during the day. Hopefully, we can all enjoy the improved amenities along this stretch now that they are completed. Thank you for your consideration of our final plat and your continued dedication to the improvement of our city for all of our families.
Thank you. Next, I have Ching Feng Wang. You'll pass. Okay, very good. And last, I have Duana Koloshkova.
Thank you, council members, and for always struggling through my name. I appreciate that. I know it's not an easy one, so at least a bit of an icebreaker. I'm here on behalf of the Connor Jarvis Group, and as well want to thank you very much for your consideration of the consent agenda.
Duana, we do need your name and address for the record.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot the address. Duana Koloshkova, and my address is 11201 South East 8th Street, Bellevue, Washington.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
We do want to thank you for your review tonight of the Meadow Leaf Subdivision Phase 1 final plat. The Connor Jarvis Group has worked for years in terms of all of the important site improvements that you've just heard about, and for many, many months diligently with staff to get to the point tonight of final plat approval. You have before you a lengthy compliance matrix going through the final plat's consistency with the preliminary plat conditions that were set in place several years ago and which were not appealed at the time. This analysis satisfies your inquiry as council into the final plat's consistency with those preliminary plat conditions as is set forth in state law defining the council's jurisdiction when it looks into final plats, such as the Meadowleaf Phase 1 before you tonight. We believe that we've provided ample information summarized in that compliance matrix that will support final plat approval. We want to thank you for your attention to this, and we hope in advance to get your approval of the consent agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council? Please come up, Karen.
Karen Herron, 23684 Southeast 32nd. I'm here to represent the stormwater stewards and the plant stewards. We really do need a property to store these plants and keep them healthy and safe and return them to the city. The stormwater ponds and our systems do need to be kept natural and clean and hopefully not bricks and mortar. They need to stay natural. And I want to thank you for Earth Day. It was amazing. And a lot of the plants that we salvaged are back in our community, planted in their yards right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. Next, we have the consent calendar, so I would entertain a motion on that.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, assuming Ramiro voted, the consent calendar passes.
I always voted.
Okay. Next, we will move on to presentations and proclamations. We have a presentation on the Habitat for Humanity. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Gail, we're very happy to have you here. I'd like to introduce Gail Luxembourg, the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity, who is a very good friend of the city, making great progress on the Habitat site on 228th. So we'll welcome you and are looking forward to a wonderful update.
Thank you, Lyman. Thanks very much. Thank you, City Council members, Mayor. This is, I think, my third visit to give you an update on what's going on down the street with the Habitat Project. And if I'm repeating myself, from information I provided before. Please excuse me in advance, but just want to give you a little bit of an overview. Habitat for Humanity is a name that many of you may know. We have high name recognition, but I want to tell you a little bit about what we do so we're all familiar with it. I want to thank you all, first of all, for your support of Affordable Housing Week. We work in solving and providing solutions for affordable housing, and we do so through the home ownership model. We believe that home ownership is a really critical milestone for families to aspire to and get to. And what we do is we serve low-income families who earn at between 30 to 60% of average median income, and they hold a mortgage. They buy their house, they put in sweat equity. We build our homes through our own staff and volunteers. We have served over 500 families so far throughout King County. We're building all over the county right now, and we're really proud to be building down the street here in Sammamish. The purpose today is to give you an update on what's going on down the street. So that picture that you see was taken fairly recently. And on the construction side, I'm proud to tell you that okay.
Melanie, are you able to
Can I
advance
get an
it?
assist? Next slide, please. Which am I? Oh, here we go. Okay. So far, thank you. We have 10 building permits in hand. We have 7 foundations poured, 3 more on the way, 4 houses framed with roofs, and we'll be framing 2 more next week. Windows, doors, trim, and siding are going up on the first floor, of the homes. And as you know, we've been working on the site for a while now. We spent some time on the infrastructure. Once we start going vertical, you're going to see a lot of changes and a lot of things happening quickly. Our completion is scheduled for the end of this year. We expect our families to be moving in time, some of them for the Christmas holidays. The rest will be moving in shortly thereafter. So you're going to be seeing a lot of activity out on that site right now. I want to tell you a little bit about our homeowners. So far, we have selected 9 families. Those families right now are comprised of 15 adults and 22 children. 5 of the families are coming from the east side within the neighborhood. 2,000 hours sweat equity have already been invested by the families, and some of the jobs that these families hold include U.S. Postal Service worker, janitor, bus driver, retail, and housekeeper. I do want to put a disclaimer on this that until we close with our families, this is sort of a profile of what they look like. We know from experience that there's sometimes changes along the way, but if you're out volunteering, you'll meet some of the families on site. You've also heard me talk about this as a cottage design, and so our families will be living in close proximity with front porches. Parking will be below. They're really designed for the families to have interaction, and that's really important for us because we know that homeowners have outcomes that are much higher than renters. We know that educational achievement is much higher. Every time a kid moves, they lose 7 months of schooling in their achievement level, so keeping them in their homes is really important. We know they graduate high school at much higher rates. We know that job stability is much higher. We know that they pay their taxes. We also know that health outcomes are higher. So living in a community where you get to know all your neighbors and you have a support system is important. So as you drive by, hope you take a look at the houses as they become more apparent, what they're going to look like, and see what the design is for all our homeowners. You also know that Habitat works heavily in the community. So in order to get the word out about the work we've been doing here in Sammamish with the city and with Habitat, we've had over 50 meetings with 35 community groups. I'm not going to read the list to you. You can see it here. That is the way we've been getting our volunteers, and we've also been sourcing our homeowners is through these outreach meetings. And now that we're building rapidly, we have lots and lots of volunteer groups coming out. We've already had 777 volunteers. The groups listed here are groups that have volunteered in the last 60 days. We've had volunteers out over the last year from companies around the area as well, and we're always welcoming new volunteer groups. So this is just the most recent ones. The upcoming event and banners went up today, so as you drive home tonight, you might notice that Women's Build Week is the week preceding Affordable Housing Week, and Women's Build Week will be working heavily out on the site for a whole week. We'll have heavy press coverage. Evening Magazine will be out there filming on May 8th. And Lowe's will be on site with us on May 8th. And on May 12th, I'm really pleased that I'll be working with Mayor Malcho, so that we'll be out there working together. And we're still looking for volunteers, so I've left more information in the back of the room. No, you don't have to be a woman to volunteer. But there will be a lot of us on site. So it's been a pleasure working here in Sammamish. We look forward to welcoming our families when we get in our final construction stages. We'll be inviting you to our dedications, and we hope that you will be able to attend. We really look forward, and our families look forward to all the great services that you have here in Sammamish. We know that our families are going to have great lives in these homes. Their kids are going to have great schools to attend, recreational events. And one other thing, these homes will stay permanently affordable. So when our homeowners want to move on, whether it's into market rate housing or they move to new locations or they have changes in their lives, we structure our agreements with them so Habitat buys the homes back, and then we find other qualified families to buy them. So this will be a longtime Habitat community. We thank you all very much for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to our next presentation, which is the brand research and draft brand statement. Oh,
Chris, I have a question for Gail.
We have a question from the ceiling.
Okay, I'm ready for it.
And
From
Go ahead,
the cloud.
we have Romero Valderrama is participating from afar.
Got you. Ready.
All right. Yeah, it looks like our website is behind, so they still have the slide up not showing. But, Gil, what I was curious about, you had talked about the people who you've recruited. How many of them will work in Sammamish or in Redmond or Issaquah?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear clearly. The homeowners are you referring to? How many of them
many of
will
them
work on
work
site?
in Sammamish.
How many of them are working in Sammamish?
Issaquah or Redmond, I think is what he said. The three.
Yeah, my recollection, I don't have the numbers in front of me, is about half of them right now. Frankly, that might change by the time we get to closing because, you know, people will be looking for jobs out here. So we select families based on where their current occupation is, but they're not looking necessarily to stay in that same job. Right now, about half our families are working in the area.
Okay, thank you, Gil.
Great. Anything else?
I don't think so. Thank you. Okay, now move to that brand research and draft brand statement. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you very much. We have Kelly Hildy, or I'm sorry, we have Kelly Stickney here this evening to introduce our consultant and lead us in a discussion of our brand research and draft brand statement. So without further ado, let me turn things over. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm here tonight with Ed Barlow of North Star Destination Strategies to present results from the research phase of the brand process and our draft brand statement. North Star was chosen for our branding project out of 9 applicants. This project has received $61,250 in grant funding from the Port of Seattle with a requirement of a 50% city match of $30,625. What you'll see this evening is just a small taste of all the research that was gathered to influence our brand direction, including multiple surveys, one-on-one interviews, focus groups, community pop-ups, and the external surveying to our neighboring communities and colleagues. A full report of this research will be provided much later in this process. The purpose of tonight is to share our interim findings with you and to hear from you that you believe the brand statement is headed in the right direction. If you agree that we're headed in the right direction, staff will move into the creative stage with North Star, and we will come back to the Communications Committee in the next few months when we reach the next check-in point. And later this year, we'll come back to the Council to present the final product to you. With that, I'm going to have Ed present you a brief summary of our research and our draft brand statement. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks. Mayor, Council, glad to be back in Sammamish and excited to share this information with you. As you may know, North Star is a firm based in Nashville, but working all over the country. We've worked several times here in Washington State. Sometimes when we go into communities across the country, folks will ask us, well, why do we need a firm out of Nashville to do this? We bring objectivity to it. We've worked with 225 different, more than 225 different communities across the country and have experience listening to what makes a community distinct and ownable and best from those who love it the best, those who live and work in a place. And so we will get started here, but we say very simply that your brand is what people say about you when you're not around. Branding is what you do about it. So why is that important? Well, our reputations matter. Every person, every place, every product has a reputation, but it may not be as accurate. It may not be as far-reaching. So that's why we need to spend some time doing research to uncover that. And so this isn't about us talking to a handful of folks and making a recommendation. We are uncovering what is distinct and notable about Sammamish from the people in Sammamish, and then we also get that outside perspective as well. Reputations matter because we make decisions based on it every day. We don't move anywhere or visit anywhere or take business anywhere based on a logo. It's how we emotionally connect with that place. You may recognize the name Richard Florida. He wrote The Rise of the Creative Class and other books. He thinks how people think about a place is less tangible, but there's nothing really more important. And so our process at North Star, we spent 4 months studying Sammamish from within, but also looking from the outside in, and then studying the context of the community. So 4.5 months of research going into what I'll call an hourglass shape here. And so then we will narrow that, as we have, to a strategic DNA statement. This is not creative language. It is what is distinct and ownable for the community. So it will be broad enough to include all interests in Sammamish, but specific enough to be compelling. And as Kelly mentioned, the balance of the process is moving into the creative phase, and then also implementation planning. How that strategy, how that statement, what is distinct and ownable, comes to life throughout the community, whether that's policy, Parks and Rec, schools, the business community, nonprofits, neighborhoods, all aspects of Sammamish. This is not a plan on how and where to use a logo. It's how to bring that strategy to life and be meaningful and relevant in all of those areas. And so as we go through this process, most places that we work, when we share a strategic DNA statement or positioning statement, it's not a revelation. So we may confirm some things that you thought. The surprise may be in actually how we have articulated it in that statement. You may agree or disagree with some of the research that you see today. It's perception research, so it's what people know or think they know. And so again, we're evaluating that, that reputation and want to get to that understanding. And so this is a full list of all of the research done on behalf of Sammamish, and we have condensed it greatly for tonight's presentation. Quantitative, qualitative, inside Sammamish, from the outside looking in, as I've mentioned. The first piece that I want to talk about is what we call the brand barometer. It measures advocacy. We ask a very simple question in a community-wide survey here in Sammamish. You had 360 respondents to this survey. Very simply, how likely are you to recommend living in Sammamish to a friend or colleague, visiting Sammamish, or conducting business in Sammamish? And so I'll share an advocacy score compared to a national average. And so just to give you an idea of how we evaluate this, if this is the score for living in Sammamish, so we look at folks that would say a 9 or a 10. They are promoters, enthusiastic, they're excited about Sammamish, they're telling people about it. So you can see here that over a third, a perfect 10. So a great aspect for Sammamish. We look at 7 and 8 as passive, probably satisfied, but not very vocal about it. And then from 6 to 1 is a detractor. And so our brand advocacy score is going to remove these passives, and we're going to measure promoters minus detractors to get at this advocacy score. And so you can see here that living score well above the national average. Sammamish is in blue, national average is in yellow. Not as high a score and below the national average for visiting and conducting business. So I'm going to start with internal perceptions. That brand barometer was from the community-wide survey, which you had 360. We were here for a week earlier in the year and had great conversations one-on-one with folks, focus groups. We removed the research bias and had some man-on-the-street undercover interviews. Early in the process, we had a qualitative survey that was all open-ended questions sent to business and community stakeholders with a great response rate of 83, and then we've talked about the community-wide survey. So a large range of conversations and survey respondents. But there was a lot of similarity across these survey pieces and conversations. So for the sake of tonight, I'm going to use the community-wide survey results to reflect overall what we learned through the research. So the 360 folks from the community, and asking them about the best descriptors. So you see family friendly at the top, followed by a good margin there. People could choose 2 answers, safe and clean, affluent, and upscale. This is about uncovering what is distinct and ownable, competitive advantages. So asking folks about the greatest assets, over half pointing to the great schools, followed by the scenic beauty and the beautiful trees here. Now, we're not going to build a brand around anything negative, but in a process like this, we can gather what some concerns are or challenges. And so respondents first pointing to traffic and then concerns about managing growth. From that qualitative survey early in the process, we were curious, the stakeholders, if they considered Sammamish business friendly. And yes was almost 30%, no was 42%. We ask questions that may point to what people wish they had or what they think is missing or what priorities are. Infrastructures followed by amenities here in Sammamish. This is uncovering those distinct and ownable competitive advantages. So we were curious about the identity of the community, and overwhelmingly, almost 3/4 saying the trees and lakes, followed by the sense of community. Okay, now we're going to look from the outside in. What is our reputation? Is it accurate? Is it as far-reaching as we like? We have a couple of pieces of research summarized here. So the first is what we call a consumer awareness perception study. This is a quantitative survey done outside of Sammamish, so no Sammamish residents take this, so the Sammamish bias is not reflected. So this is in King, Kitsap, and Snohomish County. We wanted to talk to people that were at least somewhat familiar with Sammamish. So anybody that said that they were not at all familiar, anyone under 18, and any resident of Sammamish were terminated. So we had to go to 491 people to get to our, we try to get 200 respondents. We were able to get 209 in this survey. They don't know it's about Sammamish when it starts. So when you think of the following communities, what first comes to mind for Sammamish? Water, lake, expensive, suburbs, far, isolated. And you can see the respondents, how they describe the others as well. We were curious about the reason that you would visit the following communities. And you see no reason or unsure for some of these, but friends and family, water and lake for Sammamish, and outdoor recreation. And so the only two places that this respondent group would go for outdoor recreation or listed here is Issaquah and Sammamish. Again, they don't know this is about Sammamish. We ask about all of these communities. Which two of the following communities do you most associate with highly educated people? You see Sammamish in the middle. How about with parks, lakes, and trails? Sammamish topping this list here. Big, beautiful trees, Issaquah and Sammamish. Great schools. Most desirable place to live. Sammamish in the middle there. And remember, there's no Sammamish bias, so there are some people in Mercer Island and those other areas that did take this survey. What do you most associate with Asian cultures? Now folks are going to understand this is starting to be about Sammamish. So we saw those descriptors from our internal research, asking the same question outside, pointing to the scenic beauty and being tree-lined, followed by a great place for families. Now, we asked during the research, what do we think when the internal conversations, what do you think outsiders are going to say? So we've already looked at the column on the right in the graph that I just showed you. But you can see on the left when we asked that question from an internal perspective, we think others are going to think a little less of us than they actually do, which is not uncommon. We see that a lot in the communities that we work with. We wanted folks to rate on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 does not match. 1 is an exact description. So you see schools and outdoor recreation topping these ratings, but high ratings overall for each of these. 86% of these respondents have visited Sammamish, and the majority of those are visiting family and friends. So that's the importance of that brand barometer score and that advocacy score. If they're coming to visit family and friends, what are they having them do or see? Are they aware of all that? So that gets to wanting to improve at least the visiting and conducting business score. Asking them an open-ended question about what was missing in Sammamish. They were not sure. Housing affordability and amenities. Asking them the same question about the identity. What's most important to the identity of Sammamish? Without blank, it loses its essence. Trees and lakes, so some similarities here, both from the internal and the external. Now, we made lots of phone calls to surrounding communities, economic development professionals in the Seattle area, tourism, different external conversations, and have summarized these many conversations here. The assets that they pointing to some of the similar ones that you see, seeing that we talk to a lot of neighboring communities. They're, I'll say, envious of the civic campus and the beauty here, the housing market. So you can see some of the same assets and advantages listed here. concerns that they have. And again, knowing that I'm talking to economic development professionals, the responses tend toward that or neighboring communities. A concern about not being at the regional table and noticing some paralyzing indecision, and you see, and not recognizing responsibility and growth. Again, this is perception research. Okay, so we're at the neck of that hourglass. What did we learn from all that research? How do we, from all those great things that we learned, what is that distinct and ownable strategic positioning? So some insights that lead us there. I'll remind you that the essence of strategy is sacrifice. You don't want to try to be all things to all people. You'll end up being not much to anyone. So while almost every community we go to says our people are great, it's a great place to raise families. So we look at that and peel things back to see about that connective tissue and what exactly is distinct. So this positioning is going to help us communicate to our audiences, particularly our internal audiences. It's going to articulate and demonstrate why Sammamish is a great place. And so as I share these insights, I'm using some quotes from the research, and this gets to the fact that reputation matters. This person not hearing much from the community, and curious if Sammamish is telling a story. So we learned through this process of gathering the research, lots of pressure on this brand. This gentleman telling us that people will evaluate whether or not you got us or did it right if you agreed with them. So seeing that as a challenge. But you saw throughout, both internally and externally, appreciating the trees, the vista, the beautiful setting here, and it is spectacular. So we heard lots of great things: family-friendly, great schools, quality of life, people protecting their environment and quiet places. This gentleman saying it's like living in a forest. But also some not so great things. You saw both internally and externally about vocal minority having some sway or concerns there, or lack of vision. But again, we're not building a brand around anything negative. We can't do it in a vacuum. So we need to understand these things. And brand is not going to solve all of those issues, but it can contribute to some conversations. But what does make us distinct? I showed that spectacular image. The vistas are fantastic. That civic campus, the facilities here, an innovative culture, a beautiful respite that's great to come home to. So again, distinct here. And Sammamish, the new kid, doing things in a new and fresher way. And this is not an exhaustive list of things that we learned about where Sammamish is doing interesting and new and taking new perspectives. So this strategy statement, it is not creative language. It's a long statement. You will notice by its length that it is not a tagline. It will not fit underneath any logo ever. It's an internal guiding principle, a foundation on which you will build those creative elements and that implementation planning. So as we move through the process, we will always focus on this. Our format is a target audience to whom you're most appealing. A frame of reference is a geographic identifier. Point of difference is that distinct and ownable competitive advantage, and the benefit is why that matters to those to whom you're most appealing. And so the target audience are not the only folks that you will communicate with, but it's to whom you're most appealing. For those seeking a wooded respite, Sammamish, east of Seattle and along the eastern shore of Lake Sammamish, is where elevated standards for living, learning, giving, and preserving unite diverse cultures so you can enjoy the rewards you've imagined. So just a little bit of rationale for each of these statements. We saw through the research about one of the largest urban canopies, the beautiful vistas, the great neighborhoods, being outside the chaos of more dense urban metros, that frame of reference, that highly educated community, innovative along the eastern shore of Lake Sammamish, the beautiful trail there, and then that point of difference. It's a community focused on achievement, education, lifelong learning are top priorities here. It's a young and energetic city. We've already talked about that urban canopy. So a strong list of advantages leading us to this. So we're very careful on the words that we choose. As I mentioned, it has to be broad enough to include all aspects, but specific enough to be compelling. So those rewards that we've imagined, that those that are to whom you're most appealing. So these rewards can be your time with family, your better fitness, enjoying nature. This is not an exhaustive list. So a very compelling DNA statement coming out of this research. We're very excited how this can be treated creatively, but also come to life throughout the community and benefit all aspects of Sammamish. So I'm happy to answer questions about this statement or the research in general, or I have a slide of next steps. So I'll pause here.
I don't have any lights up indicating we have any questions.
Okay.
So.
I have a question.
Oh, there we go.
Chris.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to, I was surprised by two different things in the presentation. First, that in the ranking of cities, we were considered middle of the pack, despite all of these advantages we
Hey,
talked
Ramiro,
about.
we're having a little trouble hearing you.
And it's surprising to say this. Can you speak up?
Yeah. I think that's going to be tough, but here you go. I was surprised that we show as middle of the pack in the ranking of cities, and the number of comments that were made as far as loudest voices, polarizing, paralyzing, indecision, NIMBYism that were cited outside and inside. And will the branding exercise look at addressing both of those two issues?
Ramiro, we're losing you. You're kind of fading in and out.
All right. Is this any better? Let me try
Yes.
All right. Okay, let's try this one here. So I was surprised that we showed in the ranking of cities as in the middle of the pack of the cities, and noticed also that we seem to be consistently seen internally and externally to have a number of perception of loudest voices, paralyzing, polarizing, indecision, NIMBYism, and will the branding exercise look at moving us up and seeing how we can address some of those negatives?
Sure, great question. So yeah, we heard that both internally and externally, as you noticed, and so branding can't solve all of those issues, but there may be some ways that we can give thought to that in the implementation planning and make some recommendations. So sometimes the act of coming together or the outcome of that is working together, and so it just may be understanding that that is a perception and adjusting some communications or some activities that can challenge that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, very good. I don't see any other questions, so.
Okay. And Kelly's pretty much covered the next steps, so we'll move into creative phase, and then there'll be a final presentation and report.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll move into unfinished business, where we have the addition of an agenda item on the level of service and comp plan. Councilmember Hornish, since you brought this up, I might turn this over to you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, if we're going to launch into that, could we get a quick break before we do that?
That's fine.
Sure.
Something tells me this is-
5 minutes. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I would, I was thinking that when I looked at it, I would agree with that, yeah. Yeah. I wondered about that. Oh, really? I saw it, I saw him when we drove in.
Oh, I wondered. I
Yeah.
didn't know what was going on there. I'm surprised it wasn't a council member.
Oh, it
or
wasn't
someone
Pam?
at council meeting.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, better take it away.
Yeah, exactly.
Elementary last night, and I really never got into that Sterling procedure.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But last year, how to solve things. It was the third person interview, even if they did not, alibis, they ended up being the guilty party. Last night was confusing, I could not figure it out. Did you watch it last night? Okay.
And I bet you thought you were coming in tonight for a simple meeting. You knew, didn't you?
But I did not anticipate you know. Oh, is that what all that was going on? Well, I saw like 6 cars.
The drunk driver.
At least it wasn't a council member coming to the meeting.
Yeah, wasn't me. Although I gotta tell you, there's sometimes I feel like drinking before the
Uber.
Yeah, but I'm Ubering in.
I think it'd be kind of fun.
Kind of fun, but.
I just got my car delivered in San Diego, so I got to Uber up to the car tomorrow. Yeah, I had it shipped. Yeah.
No, I had nothing to do with
No, I took mine.
All right, are we all back? Yeah, all right, well, let's just go ahead and get started then. All right, I'm going to call us back to order here. We're actually going to do a quick reversal here because we have Mike Sugg and our police chief are here, and they're not as interested in level of service as we are. So we're going to let them go first. So we are going to do, under new business, the ordinance amending sections 8.10.10 and 8.10.130, and this is related to the Sammamish Municipal Code relating to firework penalties.
Great.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. We're very fortunate tonight to have Chief Michelle Bennett here and Mike Sugg working out of the city manager's office. Michelle has had a very busy day. We've had a fair amount of activity here, and the night is still young. So we'll turn things over to her so she can continue on with the good work that their police department's doing. So we are bringing forward to you an update to the code sections referenced, trying to close a loophole for enforcement of our fireworks prohibition in Sammamish. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to you both. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And good evening, Mayor, Council, and City Manager. Once again, my name is Mike Sugg. I am the Management Analyst for the City Manager's Office. I'm joined by our wonderful Police Chief, Michelle Bennett. And as mentioned, we are here tonight to discuss a draft ordinance that's in your packet tonight relating to fireworks enforcement. As the City Manager had mentioned, this has been an ongoing issue, so we are trying to close the loophole here with this ordinance. So currently, fireworks are prohibited in Sammamish outright, unless you do receive a public display permit, which comes with a lot of regulations and requirements around that. The current penalties are $500 for possession of fireworks, $1,000 for discharge, and a misdemeanor for violations that fall outside of either of those, such as if you were to sell fireworks. We thought the council might be interested in seeing the number of calls for service relating to fireworks. So we pulled data from the past 4 years. The top bar shows the number of calls for service for the entire year, and the bottom is just the number of calls on July 4th specifically.
And to clarify, calls for service is just a citizen calling in saying, I hear fireworks, so not necessarily an arrest or a response.
No, thank you. So based on these 4 years, it's not a huge time period, so we can't really draw any conclusions as to trends from this graph here, but I thought it might be interesting to see. So the problem with the current regulations is that in many cases, the officers are unable to enforce them. And this is a result of our civil penalties as opposed to criminal penalties. So with the civil penalty, the officer can't go onto private property to cite the violator. So every year, the officers will be driving around and they'll see fireworks being shot off from somebody's backyard or side yard, but there's no method for them to go back and actually cite that individual. So not for lack of trying. And so the question becomes, how do we cite the responsible party while maintaining non-criminal penalties? And the proposed solution is quite simple. All you would need to do is add a definition for responsible person. And this is a very broad definition in the draft ordinance. It could be the person who physically lights the fireworks. It could be the organizer of an event at which fireworks are being shot off at. It could be a property owner who allows their property to be used to shoot off fireworks. And this alleviates the need to enter onto private property. So going back to that situation where fireworks are being shot off by in somebody's backyard or side yard, in that case, the officer would just document the scene and then find out who owns the property and cite that person. And this is actually almost identical to the method of regulation we use for the underage drinking ordinance, which was passed in 2015, where the property owner of, so if there's underage drinking occurring at a property, that the person who owns that property receives the ticket for allowing that illegal activity to occur.
Mike, can I ask a quick clarifying question, or Chief, this may be for you as well. So you said then they send the person the ticket. Do they not? Would you knock on the door or ring the doorbell, or otherwise the fireworks continue?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So the way that I would see this working in action is 4th of July comes around, actually anytime. Generally the 4th of July is where we have the most activity. So we have officers on patrol, working extra patrol on that day. So we're driving around, we see a fairly significant fireworks show or a bunch of fireworks, whatever it is that we see. Last year, I did patrol around the city. There were some significant fireworks shows on Beaver Lake, Pine Lake, and East Lake Sammamish. At least one of those, if not more, we did knock on the door, and basically the homeowner slammed the door in our face and said, "You can't be here," which he was correct. So at this point, we would still knock on the door and try to gain access and say, "Hey, you can't shoot off fireworks. Is the homeowner here?" And if they slammed the door in our face or refused to open the door, that would be when we would go back to the station at the end of the night, write up our case report and paperwork, finding the address, or we document the address, probably take pictures of the scene, and then forward it to the prosecutor for review for the filing of charges. But we'd make every attempt initially to stop the fireworks show, but that did not work well for us at all last year.
No, yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll do our best.
Okay. Thanks.
So the other part of this draft ordinance is relating to penalties. So as I mentioned, the current penalty for discharging fireworks is $1,000 per violation. And upon review by the Public Safety Committee, they felt that this was being factored into certain residents' cost of doing business. So to increase the enforcement on these repeat violators, the committee recommended a tiered penalty system, where the first violation would be $1,000, the second $5,000, and third and subsequent violations $10,000 per violation.
So I've got a question up here. Councilmember Stewart.
What's the definition of a violation? Is that once per day? Is that you go and knock on the door 3 times and they keep doing it?
Only if it's 3 times. No. No, it's a very good question. It was one that we discussed during our meeting. So it really is one of those things where it's officer discretion. So if I respond to a house on a dispatch call for service, or I on-view it as I'm driving around, and I knock on the door and I say, "Listen, here's the ordinance. It's illegal to set these off. You need to cease and desist. And you're going to receive a citation in the mail for $1,000. Yeah, whatever, fine." They shut the door, and then they go back and set off a bunch more fireworks. So at that point, each subsequent violation for the year of 2018, which Mike will explain, would be another $1,000 violation. Now, at what point, how many $1,000 violations are you going to, actually issue? So if a reasonable person would say, knock it off, they get a citation. If they continue out throughout the night, depending on how many and who's complaining, it is possible that we go out again and issue a separate citation for failing to comply. But there's probably a line of reason there where at some point we're going to have to not write 50 tickets to the same person.
So I have a follow-on question, and maybe you answered it, but so you said several $1,000 tickets, and I realize it can't go into effect this summer. It would be 2019, and you may get there later. I know that's later in the slide deck. But at what point is the second violation where you're issuing a $5,000 ticket? When does that come? The same night or a different night?
So
potentially.
Again, next year, let's say next 4th of July, we're out and about. Same thing happens. We knock on the door. Hey, it's illegal. You can't do that. Stop. We would, of course, and I should have said this when you were asking Councilmember Stewart, we would, of course, say, if you do it again, a warning. If you continue to set off fireworks and we have to come back, you will receive another $1,000 ticket, right? So same thing next year. We would say, listen, we're citing you for the $1,000 violation. If we have to come back, the second violation is $5,000. Okay. And then if we come back at the $5,000, we'll say, hey, this looks like a $16,000 night for you. I'm not sure how much your fireworks cost, but I would probably stop. So, of course, discretion and being reasonable is important. But the whole goal is, fireworks can be very dangerous and set houses on fire, and they certainly disturb dogs in the neighborhood. We had some really upset people last year, and, we want to enforce the ordinances here in the city.
Thanks.
All right, and finally, we are going to talk about the effective date. So local regulations that are more restrictive than those in state law have to have a 1-year waiting period before they can go into effect. So that tiered penalty system we just discussed would be considered more restrictive than state law, requiring a 1-year waiting period. So those specific provisions in the ordinance have an effective date starting on June 1st of 2019. And until then, the penalty remains at the current level of $1,000 per violation. The other amendments allowing for easier enforcement would be effective 5 days after the council adopts the ordinance. So for this 4th of July, if this ordinance was passed, the officers would be able to ticket violators at the $1,000 level. And then July 4th, 2019, they would still be able to ticket, but this time they would be using that tiered penalty system. And we'd be happy to answer any questions.
So just to clarify, because for those that might be listening and are, considering, so you don't need access to the property if this is passed by the council this January. You can issue that $1,000 ticket.
That is correct.
Okay.
This July, I think you meant.
July. Well, it could be June if they want to set off their fireworks
You
early.
said January.
Oh, January. No, I meant June. Sorry. Yeah. I don't see any other questions unless anyone else has got a question. Nope. All right.
Okay.
I got to get back to. Yep. I got to get back to that. Let's do it, baby. So if we want to take action on this, Councilmember Hornish.
Yeah, I'd move to approve the ordinance as drafted in our packet.
A second?
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Romero, just to make sure. Okay, very good.
No, I'm good.
Okay. All those in favor of the ordinance for firework penalties, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
By a vote of 7-0, the ordinance passes.
Great. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you. So now we will go back to the unfinished business with the addition of the level of service and comp plan discussion. Councilmember Hornish,
All right.
again, I'll turn this back over to you.
Thank you. Well, we had an interesting, fun night last night. I went home and thought a lot about it. I think when I thought about it, we have a lot of traffic issues, and actually it was interesting from the branding presentation that traffic and management of growth were the two biggest things for the citizens, and not as big of an issue for outside, but still an issue is what I saw. But I do believe very strongly that our traffic issues and infrastructure needs to be fixed, which is what we started on down the road 9 months ago now. I also believe strongly that the town center is a desired asset for the city that we need, and it'll be a great advantage for the city. These two things must work together. So, we were trying to balance those two competing interests to some extent, I guess, and compromise on an intersection LOS only as a proxy to the travel time that was being thrown about that could be easily measured, so we could lift the moratorium sooner rather than later with a plan to revisit the time of travel method in the future. As a reminder, I was the one promoting the use of the intersection LOS as a compromise to get the town center going again. STCA as an aggregator brings so many advantages to the town center plan that I was willing to compromise and use it and get to the TOT sooner, or actually later. Unfortunately, as we've gone through this process, we've learned a lot. I've come to learn that using the intersection LOS is a modeled estimate of the delay at intersections. And I've lost faith. In fact, I've become convinced that it actually does not measure the delay at all. It's just a guess. And it is not a good proxy for what we're trying to do, which is address the driver experience. In addition, last night, I learned that even though we adopt an intersection LOS only, we cannot incorporate such changes into the long-range plan portion of our comp plan within the time frame we had projected and planned. I don't like that. I don't like to do a poor job. And I don't think it makes any sense to only revise the comp plan halfway and keep the roadway capacity, average weekday traffic, of volume methodology for the long-range planning in the city's comp plan. This was new info to me last night, something that I was not previously made aware of. One of my favorite sayings is you can only make a decision with what you know at the time you make that decision. When we made the decision previously, we thought we knew that we could get there. I learned last night we're not getting where I thought we were going. For this reason, and because my comfort level in the modeled intersection LOS only, as being a good proxy for the time of travel, has continued to decrease, and as we've gone through this process, I propose we now replace the intersection LOS with a time of travel method now. I feel that if I now know that a comp plan amendment is to be put in front of me in July, that I'm not comfortable with now, I'd be doing a disservice to allow it to continue forward at this point in time. So I suggest we change the course now, sooner rather than later. I fully understand the ramifications of this if we decide as a governing body. I understand including delays in continued development, frustration of landowners wishing to sell to developers, and landowners not being able to develop on their property when they want. But I feel I was elected to balance the citizens' concerns with those of the developers, and if we continue down the path we're on, I'm now convinced that we have failed our citizens. If we have a majority of the council that feel the same way, and we decide as a body to regroup on the methodology that we're using, because of the timing impact this will have, and I know we may need to revisit our prior resolution that supports the town center if it can comply with the methodology that we now adopt, but only if the infrastructure can support it. We will have to revise the planned timing in that prior resolution, and we would expect to adopt a new comp plan fully implementing the new LOS methodology. And I guess it boils down to, if we can't do it right, let's start over and do it right, and in whatever time it takes, I'm okay with that. I don't know, maybe we should actually do the TMP first. We had that discussion earlier. We made a decision with what we knew at the time. What I know now, maybe it makes sense. I'm open to that discussion. We can do the TMP along with the time of travel LOS. But I believe if we do the TMP, instead of doing just the LOS methodology, it would extend the time frame even more than if we just revisit the LOS methodology using time of travel. But I'm open to considering that. Open for discussion.
Councilmember Stewart.
So, Tom, I'm reminded that we had a conversation out there in the vestibule back in January when we were discussing whether we should do the TMP first or concurrency first. And I don't want to misquote you, but I believe that you said to me that you could not imagine a situation where we would come up with any results that wouldn't fit into the long-range planning. And I guess I view as the council, and I view good leadership as providing clear and consistent direction. And I just want to point out that if last June, if the staff had stayed the course on working on the TMP, the discussion we'd be having tonight would be potentially approving a completed TMP, which would include a new concurrency model. So while I appreciate your concerns, I really feel like we have to stop wasting time and our resources. We've already wasted time. We've already spent an extra $400,000 on the consultants in changing our minds, and I feel like we need to move forward. I appreciate that you have concerns about the model, but I believe we raised those concerns. Staff took the action items to say that they would go look into those and get back to us. That was only 2 weeks ago that we raised those concerns, and I think we need to find out from them when they can come back with that information before we change course again. I just feel like we keep changing course and we're not getting our work done. We have so many things we need to be working on, and we're taking up all of staff's time with this. We have ordinances we want to look at, right, for our building ordinances. We have other transportation needs that we need to be looking at, right? I think, I couldn't agree more with the concerns that we have a light rail station going in, and I believe as a council, if the only way people from Sammamish can get to that light rail is getting in their own cars and driving themselves there, then we have failed. And so we really need to just, let's get this done, and then let's get to the TMP and let's do that right. I just feel like we have to get some of this work done and move on and do the right thing. And I appreciate you being willing to say, well, maybe we should have done the TMP first, but we had that discussion, and I feel like all the points you just raised, we brought up at that time, and we were just summarily dismissed. And so I know you're frustrated, but I'm frustrated as well, because I feel like we had this discussion in January.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Tom, I share your concerns. I mean, I think there are some issues with the intersection level of service numbers that we saw last night. I think there are some serious concerns. I spoke with Councilmember Moran and Councilmember Ross about this when we were meeting after the meeting, and just I think that there was a consensus that there seems to be some issues with what we saw last night. And I think those issues need to be fleshed out. And I think that we need to ask the consultants and our staff to try to essentially do what Mayor Malchow did, is actually do some quality checks. Does this make sense? Are the numbers that we're seeing at these intersections, are they accurately reflective? And I'm not talking, 8 to 9 on a random Tuesday morning. I'm talking about let's work with them to actually do our job. Let's fly at the right altitude here. Let's figure out what we need to do. Do we need to, all of us, 7 of us, stand out? I'll do it. I'll take a day from work. I'll go out there with a clicker and take some pictures. I got an iPhone. I mean, I'm happy to go out there and pick an intersection, pick a week, preferably during the school year, right? Right? And try to get an accurate representation of what's going on at these concurrency intersections. And let's do our job, and let's work with our staff. Let's work together with our staff and our consultants, and let's double check the work. Let's do our own quality check. What I think would be a mistake right now would be to start going in reverse or to make a sharp turn away from what we've been doing. I question any data. I question whether or not the time of travel is a panacea. I don't think it is. I don't believe in panaceas. I don't think there's any one right way to do concurrency. But I do believe in our ability to take that data that we've seen come in and to put it up against real life and look at it and say, what are we seeing? And let's do our job, and let's check it ourselves, rather than saying, all right, hang on, let's go back and start an entirely new process that would take much longer, create a whole lot more risk to the city legally, and put us potentially in a different place. We're talking about Q1 next year. I don't think that is the right move when we do have the ability to find a middle ground. And that middle ground would be us doing our job and double checking that work and actually seeing if it makes sense. That's what I think would be a better step. Recognizing that I fully support what you're trying to do and do the right thing. And I back that idea. Let's see what we can do with what we have rather than rewriting it.
I don't have any more lights on, so I guess I'll make some comments here. Councilmember Stewart. Romero?
Yes, go ahead, Christy.
Okay. I was just saying, Councilmember Stewart and Councilmember Ritchie, I mean, I understand your frustrations. I think this has been a frustrating process from the get-go. But I do want to point out that we have always said this would be an iterative process. And we acknowledged in 2017 at a meeting where we were all here. I think, Councilmember Ritchie, you weren't present for that meeting, but I think it was prior to you guys actually being sworn in. And we acknowledge the fact that we may end up going down this very path in this iterative process, where we may find out that we pick a path and it's not the right path. I think my concerns were well stated actually by one of the planning commissioners last night. Mark Boffman said he had concerns that most people believe this new tool, the new tool being the level of service, and the way that we measure with it and make improvements to the city will actually fix the problems. And he seemed to indicate he had some heartburn over it. And I think that's my heartburn too. My goal in this has always been to improve the driver experience. And the question that I asked last night about finding, cross-checking that, the intersections, I think Kendra's response to that was, well, we'll go back and check the ones that are failing. What about checking the ones that aren't failing? I think there is the light at 37th, in my experience, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but I think that light actually causes a lot of our problems. I would suggest that a roundabout there might actually facilitate movement, but the 36th is still in that draft, and yes, we can take it out and have it not be a concurrency intersection, but the more we remove our measuring tools from this process, the less pulse we have on impacts of future development on our roads. And I think, when we set out on this path to get at concurrency, it was to fix a problem. And at this point, I'm not convinced that level of service at intersections fixes the problem. I raised it at the last council meeting that, level of service at intersections, and I felt like there should be that and. In fact, last night after the meeting, I went home and I thought, well, what if we still use the same capacity? And I know Councilmember Hornish probably hates this idea, but not having in the, the sidewalks and the bike lanes and the shoulders, but there's got to be something else there to help us to measure, because that list that I saw, without cross-checking it, and Jason, I think you asked, have we directed them to? Well, I don't personally think we should have to direct them to go and cross-check their model. I mean, eyes on that thing and 5-minute wait time at 28th and Sahali would have me going, maybe I should check that. Seems like a really long time to be waiting at an intersection, and that didn't happen. So, I have frustrations too. It's not like I want to take, 2 steps backwards, but I also want to get this right. So those are my thoughts. Councilmember Valderrama, you tried to step in. Do you want to make some comments?
Of course.
Okay, well, go ahead. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, first of all, I have to say, just for the record, I think that I don't agree.
I'm sorry. Can you do whatever you did before to be more clear?
Yes, I'm doing that now.
Okay.
I took it off the speaker, so hopefully you can hear me. Can you hear me better now?
That's better. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. First, I'm opposed to how this came on the agenda unannounced. Obviously, Tom was prepared for it, but none of us were prepared for this discussion, nor was the public, although there were some comments on Facebook on one side. So that's an issue that we'll have to discuss and set a way to address those type of issues, because this is an important issue dealing with a very serious subject to come out and jump out at here. Second, I think that what we're trying to do and start a discussion today is reverse the whole series of unanimous discussions where we had openly discussed the issues that are being raised. We keep using the word iterative. Oh, it is iterative. We've talked about that. This was meant, as Councilmember Hornish mentioned, to be something that comes out and then continues over the years to be moving to that future real-time experience, which at least when Kendra spoke to me and our small group, she said that could open up a uncharted territories was the word, as I recall, that she had used. And that while King County uses it, we heard they don't use it for impact fee. Vancouver really goes to average daily time and has 1,500 impacts. More importantly, what I'm concerned about is what this does to, as Councilmember Hornish in September 2016 said, the importance when we talked about the town center of giving consistency and giving them reliability in their decision making of what was taking place. Now you're throwing that into jeopardy and into wind, as well as our own decision processes of going back and staff being thrown in. On the real-time experience, to accommodate that, we went and procured INREX data and other real-time data to help address this solution. Even the town center is going to be a 10-year process. It's going to be a delta, and we're going to continue to be expanding and improving this. All of this was discussed. All of this was known and argued ad nauseum, including the TMT, when the majority of the council refused to hear those arguments at that point in time. So these
these are all serious concerns that have been raised and discussed and addressed, and staff did what we asked them to. April 17th, this was again revisited, discussed, and unanimously supported the decision that we were going to be following on this, and then looking forward to driver experience and how that could be developed over the years in the future. So I'm very concerned about that. Councilmember Ross, on an earlier discussion that we had dealing with how many intersections that had mentioned, how every time we throw more variables in, it gets more complicated. There is no perfect model. We knew that when we asked staff to do that, as we had gone through again on April 17th, that discussion. I find it odd that the whole issue that's being thrown up of distrust is because it's doing better than was being modeled. As Council Member Ritchie has said, let's go out and address it with what we can now. That was the intent. Let's address and continue the plan. It's an iterative plan for the next couple of years. It's an iterative plan for the next 10 years. And each time things are permitted over there, and we're going to modify it and make it better. That's what we told our citizens. That's what the council, this council, last council, and April 17th, we reaffirmed. So I think that on the spur of the moment to throw this on the agenda and try to revisit that puts staff into the wind, puts the council into the wind, raises real legal challenges, and raises real questions of how do you do this in one night with this just being tossed out. I think this would require a open session to discuss it and try to go in much more detail what it is, and if that's what you want to begin the discussion, fine, but I don't want to make any decision here on the spur of the moment without having any preparation being given or notice to anybody or information being put in, and without fully understanding the consequences to our reversals to all of these decisions. So that's my 2 bits for right now. I'm sure there'll be more in a little bit. Thank you.
Councilmember Moran.
Well, first, I think what threw this whole thing back into the mix was reviewing the number of hours that we all spent reviewing the comp plan over the weekend. At least for me, that's what threw this whole thing back into the mix. Because if anybody spent the amount of time I did in trying to review the comp plan and realizing that we were going to be in some way approving a comp plan that was not cohesive was not something I was prepared to do. It was not something I was informed I was going to be doing, and I'm not prepared to do. I have a problem with the numbers. I can tell you that I had enough of a problem with the numbers that I did finally go out and try to sit at a couple of the intersections, and they don't match. They don't match what I'm seeing, the numbers that are given. Last week I was not feeling well at a meeting we had, so I actually watched it again. I would really recommend for each one of the people that are on this council to go and watch that meeting again. I found today when I did that you'd be very much surprised in doing that, because I found that I watched between the staff and I watched between the consultants and the staff. I saw answers 4 and 5 times on was future growth counted in those numbers? Yes, no, well, sort of. Some of it was. Well, we talked to, well, maybe. I've never seen so many answers for a question. It's a simple yes, no. That's a yes, no question to me. So I am not in any way comfortable with the numbers that we have. So this is an issue for me. I also have an issue with sending this past the end of July, because we have made promises to people. So I'm also very, very torn with doing that. And I feel like we have been put in a very bad spot because we have been promised information that I feel like I've not been given. And so I feel like we have a lot of discussions to make that I'm hoping we can make civilly, and maybe work on perhaps I don't mind going out there, and I don't mind testing this data, and I'd like to make some decisions on, hey, okay, if it doesn't work, this is what we're going to do. But let's move forward. Let's find some things that we can all agree on, and if this doesn't work, what are we going to do? What's plan B, and what we're going to go from there? But we cannot just sit here and argue because, you know what, the numbers are not working, but let's verify what is working and what's not working. But we can't sit where we are, and it is never going to be okay with me to approve on a comp plan that is not cohesive. So we've got to move forward on this, and we've got to move quickly, and if that means that we need to hire different consultants or more consultants, in my mind, that's what we're going to do.
Councilmember Stewart, I recognize your light is on, but because you're on round 2, I'm going to ask Councilmember Ross if he has any comments first.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Mayor Melchow. It resonates with what Councilmember Deputy Mayor Moran said is we have a commitment for July, and we're put in this horrible spot. And I think we do need to gather the information in line with what Councilmember Hornish has represented in his opening statement. I don't want to make a decision tonight without doing an after-action review of what happened to that data last night, what happened to the data prior to last night, that the referenced prior council meeting. We need to be transparent, staff and council and public, to make sure that we're making informed decisions. I hesitate to throw the baby out with the bathwater today until I understand what it means to driver experience. What can we do, or can we fix what's wrong with the current measurements? But we need to assess that and have a discussion and understand what that means to all of us. So I'm really concerned that we've changed direction already. So we got to be very careful that we have all the facts and data in front of us before we change direction again, so we choose to do so.
I'd like to ask our city manager a real quick question. How long would it take staff and or the fare and pairs to verify the concurrency intersections? Do you have any sense of that? I mean, that was a question I actually asked several weeks ago, and I think actually last night was the third time I'd asked the question, so there was opportunity to, but they said they hadn't done that yet. I'm just curious how long it might take them to verify those intersections.
I believe it probably would take several weeks to do that. Part of the issue is you don't take a measurement and basically hold it to be the average for all situations. So that was something that they were working toward, a methodology to actually go out and test those intersections. They did have discussions on that, but they had not yet been able to do that. Maybe we could. I will have further discussions with staff. To be honest, I did not know this was going to be on the agenda tonight. I do not have staff here that are prepared to talk about it. I wish that we would have been informed so that we could have some of these questions answered for you. Staff definitely wants to produce a good product for you. They are, and I am working very hard to do that. However, we are moving on a very fast timeline, as we all discussed previously. So the data is not going to be perfect, but it will be good. So let me talk to staff, but I believe we could probably have a bulk of the data within a couple weeks for you, assuming that the methodology that we need to put into play would be meaningful to have.
So let me ask you a question. Do we need to formally ask you to?
No, staff is working on that.
Okay. Councilmember Stewart.
Sure. So I just want to say that I still believe, just as I did, and a big part of the reason why I even ran for this office is that Sammamish needs smart and managed growth, and we need investments in our infrastructure. But in order to manage the growth and to be fiscally responsible with our investments in our infrastructure, I want to reiterate that we need good leadership, and we need to provide that clear and consistent direction. I think that to say that concurrency isn't going to fix any of our problems, concurrency was never going to fix any problems. Concurrency has never been and will never be a tool to fix a problem. Concurrency is a tool to validate that our transit system is functioning as expected and to show us where it isn't currently or where it isn't going to in the future. So I've been called disingenuous, and I think that's a fair term here to say now that, oh, if we modify the concurrency model, we're not going to fix any of the problems. We knew that. But in the spirit of what can we do to go forward, I think that in knowing that we said this would be an interim concurrency model, that through developing the TMP, we would come up with that more ideal concurrency model after we had a TMP, because the concurrency model should be tailored to our transportation plan, of which we don't really have as thorough a plan as we need to. So I would like to see us not spend an inordinate amount of time or resources right now developing a concurrency model, knowing that we will have to redo it again after we do the transportation master plan. So I do want to get it as good as we can. I do want to make sure that we're improving upon what we had before, and that we're being able to identify when new development is applied for, that we understand what problems that may cause, and that we make sure we're taking appropriate mitigations when doing that. I think that's the right thing to do, and I think that we can do that with this current model, because this is, as we agreed, would be interim and iterative. So let's iterate, right? I like your term, Councilmember Ross. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's iterate on this. Speaking to some of the data, so the intersection at 36th, as it was explained to us several weeks ago, that intersection has bad numbers because the model believes it to be a four-way intersection. So the model, based on the traffic counts, assumes that people turning left out of 36th onto 228th cannot use the center to merge. It assumes that that those cars have to have a break in both directions before they can get out, which is why it overestimated the length of time for those cars to get out. It isn't actually a four-way intersection. The opposing side isn't directly across from it, and it's a driveway. It's not actually a street. So if I recall correctly, what Kendra said that they would do is that they would go back and readjust the model and make it not be a four-way intersection, and then they would go back and validate that information. So for that particular intersection, that was the case. As far as was future growth included or not, as I recall, Steve explained to us that what they did was they took all permits in the pipeline, and those are included, and they included phase 1 of the town center in those numbers. So that, we did get that answer. That is what they said that was included in those numbers. So I agree. I think we should validate this. I think we should get that plan back from staff on how we will validate those numbers. But I do believe we got clear answers to those questions at our last meeting. And again, I just feel like trying to develop the time of travel concurrency model now, knowing that we would just have to go back and redo it again after the transportation master plan, is fiscally irresponsible. That is going to be a huge amount of money that we are going to spend twice. And I just don't think that, again, the concurrency model doesn't actually fix any of the problems. I'd rather see us spend that money on transit or fixing some of these roads, preferably transit. But I'd really like to see us spending that money on actually moving people through and into and out of our city efficiently, and not on just a tool. Thank you.
Councilmember Hornish.
Yeah, I want to clarify one thing and then make a couple comments. There was a comment made that we made promises. I do not believe we've made any promises as council. I believe we have made our intentions known and expectations of what we knew then, but new information has come to light that changes those intentions and the timing. So just to clarify that, at least from my point of view. The last little bit of this discussion has been focused on the model and whether or not it's right. There's two issues, and that's why I said this is time to raise this now. We can go back and assess it, and frankly, I'm open to not taking action tonight, I guess is the best way of saying that. But I haven't heard anybody talk about how we're going to address the comp plan that was put in front of us last night. That's inconsistent. That's not how I work. I want something that makes sense when I submit it to a government agency. So there's two issues here. And I'm open to reconsider and think about the LOS. But I think we're spinning our wheels, and I think we're just wasting time versus moving on. And the reason I wanted to bring it up now is to let it fester and go on for another month. I think we're being fiscally irresponsible to let it go. And now's the time to kind of redirect and rethink about it. Is this really getting to where we want to go now versus waiting? And I apologize for bringing it up, but this was new information from last night that there was no reason to discuss it last night because there was no action we could be taken, and we couldn't have this discussion.
Councilmember Ritchie.
It's my understanding that the potential legal risk of not amending the comp plan fully, for lack of a better term, is at this point putting in an intersectional LOS, not amending the comp plan fully because we don't have a TMP in place, and then doing that again next Q1 maybe. That risk is less than a further delay in the lifting of the moratorium, the institution of an interim LOS plan. It's my sincere hope that we can actually take a step back. Let me just put it this way. I don't think that this is as big a rush right this second as we're making the time. Councilmember Horner, excuse me. I hear what you're saying, and I do think it's definitely worthwhile looking at this. It's just May 1st. We can take a second here. As city manager said, we have a moment here to look at the information. We have a minute here to do some research ourselves as to what we see and to take a look at what Councilmember Stewart said about these certain intersections. We can do our own research based upon the numbers that we were presented last night and to see if this actually, the new model, actually makes good sense. I think we should do that now. And if it doesn't make sense, if it is not a good model, if it does not represent what we see, I won't support it. I agree with you, Tom. I certainly would not want to move forward on a plan that doesn't make sense. But the question is, how do we make it make sense? What can we do to verify what we can see and what we know, and how do we make the data come to life? I mean, I feel an obligation to do that because I think that's the sweat equity that comes with being a council member, frankly. And to turn direction now, and I'm getting the impression we're not going to do that tonight, and that's good news. But I would just hope that we can, all of us on this panel, on this board here, as a council, take an individual step forward and go out there and look at those things and direct staff to do that. Or if city manager says that they're doing it anyway, great. Then let's set up a time a month from today at our next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whenever it is, and let's take a look at everything at that next meeting. I don't have the calendar in front of me, and see where we're at. Let's present some information. Let's take our time and let's get our jeans on and get our phones out there and let's do what we need to do and see if it makes sense. I'm in favor of that. I think that's good usage of our time on this council.
Okay, I'm going to step in for my round here before we go back through the lights here. So I certainly agree we need more detail, and that's why I've been asking for it. Again, last night was round 3, asking for verification. And I would have hoped that it would have been done sooner, so I want to express my frustration in that. I realize I can't direct anybody to do anything without my fellow council members, but I would have hoped that that would have been verified. I'll feel a whole lot better than it will, but the reason I asked the question about how long it'll take, and I know, it's an on-the-fly answer from our city manager, and, maybe they'll get it faster, maybe it won't, so it's gonna add some time, and so that timeline for July is getting tighter with that delay. And frankly, I'm not comfortable moving forward with that, the transportation element that was presented to us with those numbers in it until they're verified. So I'm willing to add meetings in order to get to that point, but I want to make sure that those numbers are verified. I have fears about the time of travel methodology that I think we ultimately want to. There's nothing that says we have to do that, right? We could be married to level of service for intersections. That is at council will to do, and I have real fears that we'll never get back to it. I have a feeling that we will hear that we don't have time to take that on. We just finished the TMP. We've got to do a lot of other things, and so I fear that by the time we get around to actually doing time of travel, we'll be 3 years down the road. And that is a genuine fear. So I'm only putting that out because I think it should be in the forefront of our minds that that needs to be a priority. And then I want to correct, so what Steve said with relationship to what's built into the model is, yes, the current units that have been applied for and are vested are built in there. But what he said was for town center was somewhere between 100 and 1,000 dwelling units. They didn't know because we don't know what phase 1 is. So we really have no idea what's baked into the model literally. So anyway. And then with regards to 36, I understand why that's weird, but there's other intersections that don't have the strange T that I also can't, wrap my head around. And again, a 5-minute delay at 28th and Sahali is an average, which means some people wait more than 5 minutes at that intersection, which is a stop sign. I went through it this morning. I've been through it all week. In fact, I intentionally diverted my trip so I could go through that intersection to find out how long it was going to take me to get through there in the AM peak. It was nowhere near 5 minutes. So that's my point in wanting to have those verified, is just a cross-check. They seem very odd, and 12-second delay at 37th. I beg you to ask anybody who's traveling Sahali if it's a 12-second delay at 37th. I just want to have those cross-checked, and I'm only using those for emphasis just to get away from the 36, because I realize that's a very strange intersection. So anyway, I would hope that we could get that information, and I'm happy to wait for it, and I'm happy to add meetings in order to get it, if that's what we need to do, but I do want to get that verified. Councilmember Ross, I think you've only had one round, so I'm going to go back down there.
Likewise.
So, yeah.
I'll get you next, Romero.
Okay. Our goal has always been in July, and it continues to be our goal. And I agree with Mayor Malchow that if it takes extra meetings, extra commitment on our part to get through this, absolutely, I support that.
Very good. Romero? Can you hear us?
All right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I concur with what has been said by Council Members Ritchie and Ross, and remind everybody that no model is perfect. We have been incorporating INRIC's data that we paid for, as well as probably $500,000 that we've spent in trying to prepare something to give, as Councilmember Hornish said, the consistency and the planning for the business for our citizens in getting this done. I'm glad we're going to revisit this. I'd like to have some checks. I think we all want to make sure that it is reflective as much as any model could do. And if we're going to try to look at an alternative, and we've mentioned the real time, given what Kendra has told us that that's uncharted territory, I'd like to know what does that mean and what is gained for it. As was mentioned several times before by council members, concurrency that we've weaponized is just one of a dozen tools and will not solve any, I should say it won't solve all of our issues. It'll solve some, but it's not meant to be the be-all, end-all. And so we need to take that into account, see what the comparison and what would that give to us if we're going to have it and understand, but not start from scratch and try to figure out what does that mean, the real-time experience. That's what we brought the INRICs for, was to supposedly help with that and move and then come visit this in a couple of years. All the discussions that we're raising today, as was mentioned by Councilmember Stewart, were raised previously. And the idea of finishing the TMP first and we're all shot down at that time. But everybody consistently said, we want to get this done and at this schedule, and staff has been doing what we've asked them to do. So let's take our time, let's analyze it. We've got the extra meetings to put into it, but by now I think everybody I know on the council and staff has been caught off guard, and we need to regroup and see what is really happening, what can be adjusted, and also if anybody's looking at an alternative, what is that alternative? Let's not start from scratch and go from zero. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Sure. Mayor, I think we're all in agreement that we should validate the data, and I think that's fair. I think to address, I feel like in terms of a plan, right? We get the numbers validated. We update the ones that are inaccurate. You made a comment about 37th and how you think that light may be causing problems. That's great, but again, that wouldn't be something the concurrency model is going to tell us what to do. That's where
our staff, and the consultants will come back as part of the tip and make a recommendation. So again, I don't want to say, well, if we went and we did time of travel concurrency model, that's still not going to solve what we're going to do with 37th. All concurrency will tell us is where the problems exist. And honestly, I don't believe we need a whole lot of tools to tell us where the problem areas are, where the biggest problem areas are. I think most of us know where those are. And so I think that we should come up with a very good concurrency model. I think it should have validated data in it. But I think we know where the biggest problems are and where we need to go solve them. And again, I would like to see us spending our time and our resources actually solving those problems and not developing yet another concurrency model. In terms of the comp plan, I think that we should figure out what we can do, right? So the comp plan, you're concerned because the back half of the comp plan will still reference the old concurrency model because it won't have the long-term forecasting. Again, I guess I didn't realize what it would look like in the comp plan, but I knew when we said we weren't going to do the TMP and we were only going to do the concurrency model that we weren't going to have that long-range planning. I don't think that that puts us in a worse place than we are today. So when I think it through, right, is it ugly? Yes. Is it my preference? Not particularly. But does it put us in a worse place than we are today? No, because we'll still have a revised concurrency model that more accurately shows us where the problem areas are, which will solve our problems of if someone comes in to apply. So again, what numbers are included in the model? Since we don't know what phase one will be, when phase one is applied for, and we know exactly what those units are, they will be fed into the model, and it will tell us where those problem areas exist, and they will not be able to proceed until mitigations are put in place, right? Put on the tip and funded. So I do think if we really think through kind of what problems do we need to solve and what order can we solve them in and how can we do it in the most efficient and effective way, I do believe that we can still move forward with a intersection level of service concurrency model with validated data, fair point. That will solve our problem that the next, when the moratorium is lifted, the next permits that are applied for can be put into this model, and if they create a problem, we'll know about it, and we'll know that we need to create mitigations for it. It won't have the long-term planning because we haven't done that part yet. So the long-term planning will still be based on the old methodology, which I don't believe impacts us in the short term. What that impacts is our ability to create those long-term budgeting cycles and those longer-term transportation plans that we need to have. Do I want those? Yes. Would I like to have them now? Yes, but we made a decision in January that we were going to do that next. And I do, again, while that wasn't my preference in how we should do it, that's the decision we've made, and I think we need to continue to go forward so that we can get to these things quickly and efficiently, because I really don't want to see us wasting more resources on this concurrency model when we know post-TMP, we're going to have to redo it anyway. So I appreciate your fear, Mayor, that we won't get back to it, but that's a decision that we as a body get to make. Yep. So that's what, we just have to make that decision. And if we get a TMP and we decide that this concurrency model works, then, hey, we just saved ourselves a lot of money. And if we get a TMP and we decide that this concurrency model doesn't work, then we'll make that a priority and we'll develop a new concurrency model. So thank you.
Councilmember Moran, or Deputy Mayor Moran, excuse me.
Well, first of all, I agree with a lot of what Councilmember Stewart said, except it all comes down to the thing we're disagreeing about, which is the validated numbers, which is what we're missing from the tables that were given to us, which leads us back to the problem we had, which is what was given to us over the weekend, which is what started this whole confusion, which leads us back to the problem with our comp plan. Again, I'm going to state, which is where I haven't changed my mind on, which is we have a comp plan that, in my mind, does not and is not in any frame unless it is cohesive and it matches. And I don't care if it's a front end and a back end, whatever it is, it needs to match. It needs to be something we can put forward, and that, in my mind, I don't put something to anybody that is not in good shape, that I have not and completely happy with sending someplace. That is just not how I roll. And I was never told that that was how it was going to be done. It's just not how I do things. Second of all, the growth target, just sitting here tonight, I listened to Christy tell me how, what she understood. Then from what I understood from our attorney last night is the numbers were the growth target that was given to us, that was what was counted was the growth target of what we were given that was used without any new numbers being given about the regional council. So that was what was used. And then we have, well, maybe it was phase 1 of town center with the permits in the pipeline. I have no idea what numbers were used. I would really like to know. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of things to verify. We have a lot of things that we need to go out to these intersections. I wasn't even on 228th. So we have a lot of intersections that need to be verified, and we have to decide what we're going to do when those intersections do not match what we've been given. So rather than sitting here and trying to argue this out now, I'd say we better figure out what we're going to, how we're going to divvy up that load and go from there.
I don't see any more comments, so, oh, spoke too soon. Councilmember Hornish.
I got one last comment about the comp plan. Did anybody read in the comp plan that we're incorporating NREX whatsoever?
No.
The answer is no. So we keep talking about, oh, we're going to incorporate NREX as a check. There's nothing in the comp plan about that. Enough said.
Chrissy?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah. No, we have brought the INREX data in. We bought it. It was a huge discussion, and I see it as part of the validation of what we're doing for this model that we're trying to look and validate. I mean, that's what my understanding that it was. And if we didn't put it into the comp plan, that we will be putting it in as we move forward on the iterations to the real time. I think we have to be careful, as we've said many times before, that we not all try to be traffic engineers, and that we have to look at a model that reflects it, but not try to take empirical evidence and then say that, okay, this is it. I think that's disingenuous and insulting to the traffic engineers. But we also have to be true to our citizens and understand what's being done, and I understand that, and you have to get that and look at what are real alternatives. I have to say right now we have a plan that we've agreed to several times with all of these issues being put on the table and discussed. And the last time we heard was April 17th. Let's work, as we've all agreed here, to start seeing if we can validate the data, and then let's move forward to see where it is and where we stand. Thank you.
Good, okay. So we'll look for more information, and we will go from there. All right, moving on. I think we have, let me make sure I'm in the right spot here. Council reports. There are no public hearings. Yep, council reports. So my report is in your packet. I want to pull it up. Pardon? There's a few things I want to highlight, even though it's in writing. And one is the Sound Cities Association recycling discussion. The city manager and I both attended that last week. There is a link in the packet. So for those that are at home watching, there's a link to banned materials. And the reason it's important is that the way that we're going to have to recycle here, we will have to revisit that. If you're not washing out your spaghetti jars and stuff like that, they're probably not getting recycled. So, and contamination is a huge problem. So if you're getting your papers wet, your paper wet, when you leave your recycle bin out, if you're overstuffing it, you have contaminated probably everything in that bin, and none of it will end up in the recycle. It is all going to end up in the landfill. So I wanted to point that out. I'm going to go back up to the governance committee because I didn't put a whole lot there, but I want to just put some bookends on that. I think the policy, we decided not to continue on with the discussion at the committee level. We wanted to bring it forward. So I think the full council will see that come forward for discussion and potential adoption. This morning, earlier today, I was at the North End Mayor's meeting. I'm going to pull my notes up for that separately here. and I didn't want to get ahead of the city manager where he talks about the state lobbyists, but I did ask the question there since we had several mayors there. So I'll table that for that discussion, but I did get some feedback as far as ROI goes. We discussed one table, and Public Issues Committee will be discussing one table as a pre-pick. There's a lot of strange stuff going on there. They're not sure what's going on, to be honestly. They've been canceling meetings. There's a lot of sentiment that people are overtaxed right now, and there's not a lot of palatability for that right now. And there doesn't seem to be a meeting of minds of the co-chairs. We did hear today that the Seattle head tax is indeed moving forward. One note that kind of blew my mind, federal way school impact fees for multifamily, $20,000. I wrote that down because that was a huge number. Prepaid postage for ballots was brought up today. And one thing that is notable that I hadn't heard before, and Mr. City Manager, you may have caught wind of this, but local jurisdictions will pay 50% of that cost on that. I wasn't aware of that until today. King County Council will vote on that next week. Microsoft had something interesting as it related to paying for infrastructure, which I thought was relevant right now. They have something called a CFD, which is Community Facility District, where Microsoft is actually paying, they're taking out a bond through the city for $60 million of infrastructure. So Microsoft didn't want to get hit for those dollars, as their shareholders would maybe be frightened by that. So they're going through the city. So they are paying the interest on it, and they are paying the bond, but the city of Redmond is doing it. I thought that was interesting. And then I'll circle back on the balance of it when we talk about the lobbyist. So we'll start down at that end of the table. Councilmember Ross, did you have a report at all?
Yeah, just brief comments on the Kokanee Work Group on 425. I attended. It was a really, really good presentation regarding emergency measures, adaptive management. And adaptive management is intervening to enhance the population of fish kokanee returning to the streams. And we're in a very, very dire situation. And they don't want to do full intervention because there's risk with that. Anytime you disrupt nature, you put the species at risk. And so what they are doing is they're gathering data, doing the analysis, and there's barriers such as funding, technical disputes, because each of the scientists have different interpretations on some of the data. But most importantly, I thought this was the best comment, is we need to listen to the fish. So then going on from that, I've had...
They say. Glug, glug, glug.
I've had a couple weeks ago, we had a good report out from the YMCA, and there's been some follow-on questions that were asked at that meeting regarding the finance complexities, and the staff has reached out, and we've gathered a lot of information on that. We're going to continue to look at that information. We just received some feedback, and as soon as we understand it, then we will make a decision amongst the council if there's anything we want to return to Finance Committee to further respond. We'll go that direction. But we're working on it. The staff's working on it. And we hope, hopefully in a couple weeks, we hope to have a report out on that.
Good. Councilmember Stewart, you'd submitted a written report. Do you have anything in addition to what is on the written report?
No, the bulk of our communications committee was previewing the presentation tonight, so.
Good. Councilmember Ritchie.
No report other than the report or the information on the lobbyist regarding the legislative committee. Thank you.
I forgot one giant thing that I had on the bottom of my council report, and that is a council office hours discussion. I wanted to bring that up just because we've always had council office hours 5 to 6 p.m. the first Tuesday of the month. And I just wanted to my preference would be not to be married to that. I think it's a challenging time for council members. We're trying to like figure out dinner, and some of us have kids to contend with. And I think it's unfair to expect that the citizens, that's the only time that they can, just walk in and talk to a council members. So I had the suggestion that each one of us ought to be able to set our own council office hours whenever we want to and have the city notice it for us so that we can go in there in the council office and have people come in. So I guess I would turn it over to the council for a comment, but I'd prefer to have varied times because I think you'd capture a wider audience of our community if we have varied times rather than that evening time. That's really hard. It's hard for us, but it's really hard for them too. So.
I move.
Councilmember Ross.
Yeah, just a question on that.
Yep.
If we establish office hours, we can use the council office during weekends, for example, with public?
You
If
have a
we set
key.
it- Okay.
So I might suggest too that we, if possible, that we come with a specific day and time. That way it can be an expected event. I mean, there's a positive and a negative for that. One, the positive is that the council office, we all have an expectation of when it's open and when it's not open. I use it often for meetings. And so if I know that it's going to, every Tuesday at 11 o'clock it will be full, then I'll just know not to schedule meetings there. But those would have to be scheduled and on the calendar because I'll reserve the room so that there isn't a conflict. So just a thought if we want to do regularly set ones or if you just want to, at a whim, decide I have time this week and you want to do it then.
Do we need to do like a formal motion, or can we just
Well,
say, yeah, we all agree, let's just set our own office hours?
I believe they're in our council rules, though, are they not?
Well, I think that the council rules did designate that their office hours at that particular point in time.
Okay.
Generally, but the council rules did not address, and it has always been the policy or practice, rather than a policy, of council members setting individual times to meet with their constituents. This was something that was planned or prepared to make it easy for people to meet with you and then put a chance come to the meeting afterwards. So we have flexibility in that for the regular standing office hours, but you are free to meet with your constituents at any time, anywhere.
But if we wanted to only do the sort of freewheeling office hours and get rid of that one, we would have to amend the rules. Is that correct?
I believe we would need to do that.
And I think that's important because yes, we can always use the council office, and I think most of us probably have meetings with our constituents at any given time, but it would be nice if it was noticed by the city for those that may not reach out to council members to see that, oh, I can just walk in and meet with a council member today, and I didn't have to schedule it. And so I like that idea of having people be able to just walk in as they do now in the evening, but on Saturday, for example, or in the middle of the day. So.
Okay, the city clerk actually just corrected me. Your rules of procedures do not address the actual office hours. So you would be free to change that.
Okay.
I'm thinking of logistics. Is the office open on weekends?
Yes,
I mean, the main door?
it is not locked. It is not locked.
You have a key to
No,
get
I
into.
do, but if I'm sitting down and the public wants to meet me, are we getting logistically having to get up and unlock the door?
The front doors are not open.
That's what I thought,
as
yeah.
such, so you'd have to let people in.
Got it.
So what do we need to do in order, do you want council members to just individually contact Melanie, for example, and say, I'd like to have office hours on Tuesday at 10, and then she can notice it?
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that and work with our communications folks. And
I might suggest that if we, I'm not expecting people to say what day and time right now, but if you can send an email to the full council, if you're planning on having some regularly set time, or just so we're all aware of when you are going to be there, and technically speaking, two council members, or as we do these regular office hours now, could be present too, so. Good, that's all I had. Councilmember Moran, did you have a report?
Mine's real quick. I attended FAC last week, and outside of just reviewing policies and that sort of stuff, we went through a new software package that they're talking about getting, that's already used by the county, but currently when businesses get their fire detectors and stuff checked and they get their new, currently all that paperwork is sent to the fire department. It's got to be hand entered. And so instead of that happening, there's actually a software that all that stuff actually gets sent in, and it would all be computerized now. And so that's, they're currently looking into that. So anyway, so we kind of got an intro into that. That was pretty much what the meeting was about. But that was pretty interesting, and I do think that's going to be something that's going to be up and coming over the next couple of months.
Councilmember Hornish.
I have no report, but I do want to piggyback on the YMCA. I do want an answer, or a clear answer on the YMCA issues that we're talking about. So I hope we can get that within 2 weeks is what we're talking about. So, all right, thanks.
Okay. So we have the minutes here. Do you need to do anything with the minutes? Oh, sorry. Out of sight, out of mind. Sorry, Councilmember Valderrama, go ahead.
Yeah, I've submitted 2 of the committee reports for the legislative and public safety. They're in your books. The only ones I want to add are Eastside Fire and Rescue. That you should know we were informed that regardless of how Fall City goes, they expect the issue to be coming out on the November ballot. Additionally, on a separate note, not dealing directly with the city, but just to put it on your radars, because other cities, including Woodinville, have worked with their local Rotary for putting up peace poles in their parks, and the Rotary is beginning that discussion, and just to alert that and put that on your radars as it may be coming forward to us later on to see if we can accommodate on one of our parks.
Councilmember Valderrama, sorry, can I get clarification on what is going to be on the November ballot?
Oh, this is looking at Fall City merging
okay.
most probably Eastside Fire and Rescue's District 10.
Got it.
So that would be the November ballot.
Okay.
And then the second issue was with the Rotary, their peace poll, as other cities like Woodinville, who are putting those in parks, and they're now going through their whole process to look at it. And I'm just giving you an advance notice that this may be coming. They're going to actually have Woodinville come out and speak to the Rotary on how that was done with the city, their parks departments and arts commission. And as that starts to get formulated, that'll be coming forward to us.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. City Manager, you have a city manager report.
Yes. Tonight, essentially, we wanted to have a discussion on the topic that the Legislative Committee discussed on April 20th. So essentially, this is a check-in with the full council related to that. So I will just give you some highlights of that and then leave it open for further council discussion. So on April 20th, the Legislative Committee met to discuss the possibility of retaining services of a lobbyist to assist the city in promoting our legislative priorities. I have passed out earlier this evening a lobbyist services budgets from 2017, basically what each of our neighboring cities, peer cities that we consider, who their lobbyists were and how much they spent, so that you have that information in front of you. In addition, I had a discussion with the mayor and Deputy Administrator of Issaquah, and they proposed the idea of entering into a joint arrangement of contracting with a lobbyist and share the costs. We determined that we have generally similar interests that Issaquah has, but we do have the potential for divergent views and divergent interests. So the city, while they appreciated that potential, they determined that concluded that they would recommend that we would want to go forward on our own for this particular effort. The committee also thought that a general lobbyist would be a great start, but that consideration might be given for a specialty lobbyist, for example, to deal with transportation issues. The estimated cost annually, we would anticipate to be in the range of between $50,000 and $70,000. And there was a desire of the committee to look at the return on investment, or the ROI, as it relates to the cost or the return on that $50,000 to $70,000. Staff looked into that, and there are cities specifically thought or found that their return on investment far exceeded that, but they did not actually have numbers, facts, and figures that they had or previously done. It would be something that they would have to do additional work to get. But I think Mayor Malchow has some information related to that coming from Redmond. So generally, they found that they did have general benefits of legislation coordination throughout the sessions and prior to the sessions. It's a long-term relationship that generally is built over time. And that is something that we essentially have not been able to do because you are all part-time council members and you put on yourselves the idea of lobbying to the state legislature, and while you're very capable of doing that, you just don't have the time and are not in Olympia or meeting with them on a regular basis. So the bottom line is cities that do have lobbyists like it, and they have told us that they will continue to do it. But they have not done the strict cost accounting, what the cost-benefit analysis would be, although they are quite assured that it is very positive. So one of the opportunities that we might have if we do move forward with council's blessing to do an RFP process is to ask the lobbyists for insight on the ROI that they have experienced with the cities that they work with. So that is an opportunity for us as well. So that is my report. We're looking for the legislative committee, and staff is looking for direction from council on how you might like us to proceed.
Well, let me just inject a little bit more color based on the conversation I had today related to return on investment. So I was at the North End Mayor's meeting, and I asked the question about lobbyists. So Redmond, they're going to put out an RFP if it's not already out for services as well. But I think Mayor Marchione said that they think they've received somewhere around $150 million in infrastructure dollars. And I think Mayor Baker was there from Kenmore. They spend $60,000 for a lobbyist in DC and $60,000 for a lobbyist for the state. And he said they get 100-fold back in what they spend. But they also said, don't expect a whole lot your first year. So anyway, I just wanted to give that information as kind of some background. So Councilmember Ross.
Yeah, City Manager Howard hit the nail on the head, is gain some insight from the applicants. So I would even suggest we go even very specific in the RFP to ask for dates and outcomes from their efforts, so that we can really see how much in a given year or period of time that they're generating with specificity, which gives us great insight of whether or not they're going to help us in our efforts.
Okay. Councilmember Hornish.
I just want to clarify in my mind, this is primarily a budget issue that will be going into the next biennium. Is that correct?
Well, you actually have the option to direct me to move perhaps sooner than that if you so desire.
Would we be talking about a Washington, D.C. or only Olympia?
I think we talked about state.
I think we talked about state
that's
rather
what I
than
But they're not in
Washington,
session
DC.
until next January, right?
Correct.
But they can
So-
still lobby.
So they could
to-
still
yeah,
lobby
yeah,
and
yeah.
do the work ahead of time. That
Okay.
was part of the discussion that we had at the committee.
Fair enough, okay.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. It's long overdue. More to what Councilmember Hornish was saying, the actions we take now in an election year, the context we make now, the research that's done by a lobbying firm about our specific needs need to be done now, so that when session starts back in January of 19, they have a really good idea of what we need. And there will be a transportation package coming out of the legislature, and there's some movement there with the retirement of State Legislator Judy Cliburn. There's going to be a new chair of the State Transportation Committee in the state legislature. So new relationships need to be made, priorities need to be set, and this is an incredible opportunity for the state to return our tax dollars back to our community And that is done, as far as I know and from what I've seen, most efficiently through working with a lobbyist that understands the corridors of power in Olympia and can make sure our voice is heard, given our population, given our geographical uniqueness, given our lack of contact with 90. We don't connect with 90. We don't connect with 900. We don't connect with 202. We need somebody that can speak to our issues specifically. And I'll add that we're really lucky in that we are divided up by 3 separate legislative districts. The 45th, the 41st, and the 5th all have, so we have 9 representatives across the state legislature, the state senate, that we can go to and we can have contact with. And we need to make sure our issues are heard by us as on lobby day, but you know that's not as effectual as having a lobbyist representing our interests at committee meetings and those closed door conversations when our priorities can be front and center. So I think it is incredibly important that we act on this now and that we get somebody in place as soon as possible so that we can start that ball rolling so that we are ready to go when the January 2019 session begins.
Okay, so can we just give our city manager some direction here with some head nods? Yes, we want him to proceed forward.
We will proceed with RFP. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, we have an executive session if necessary. Councilmember Hornish, did you? Yes. Yes? Yes. Okay, so we will have an executive session, RCW 42.30.110G, evaluation of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a public employee. How long do you estimate, Tom?
You tell me. Half hour?
Okay, 30 minutes. All right, I would enter. Well, he ran back there.
Motion to dismiss?
Hold on, just, we were just trying to make sure that they actually caught the adjournment. So I'm gonna assume he's back there or not. So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, we are adjourned. 6, right, Romero's off the phone. Thank you.